Max Verstappen's greatest weapon is about to become his biggest risk. The technique that turned him into the most dominant driver of the ground effect era, the brutal, decisive, almost arrogant way he attacks corner entry, is heading straight into a regulation storm. And here's the uncomfortable question no one inside the paddock is answering publicly. What happens when the new 2026 rules change braking stability, change aero balance mid-corner, change energy harvesting behavior, and interfere with the exact phase of the corner where Verstappen built his empire? Does his edge finally compress? Do rivals close the gap? Or does Max adapt and create an even more dangerous version of himself? Because once you understand what he actually does on entry, not the highlight reel version but the physics version, you'll realize 2026 isn't just a rule change, it's a direct challenge to his driving DNA. Let's strip this down to fundamentals. Corner entry in Formula One is the most violent transition a car experiences during a lap. The car is decelerating from 300 km/h. Brake pressure peaks above 100 bar, weight transfers forward, the rear goes light, the floor stalls slightly as rake attitude changes, aero balance shifts forward, tyre load sensitivity increases, everything is happening at once. Most drivers treat this phase like defusing a bomb. Stabilize first, rotate second, protect the rear, live to fight on exit. Verstappen does not defuse the bomb, he uses it, watches onboard carefully. He commits steering input earlier than most of the grid. The car begins rotating while still shedding massive braking force. He doesn't wait for full platform stability. He overlaps braking and turning in a way that looks almost reckless, but it isn't. It's calculated trail braking at the edge of rear adhesion. Trail braking, for anyone who doesn't obsess over telemetry, is the art of gradually releasing brake pressure while steering into the corner, keeping weight on the front tyres to maximize rotation. Done properly, it shortens the corner. Done poorly, it spins the car. Verstappen lives in that thin strip between genius and spin. Telemetry comparisons over the past 2 seasons have consistently shown that his brake release curve is extremely progressive but delayed relative to peers. He carries residual brake pressure deeper into the turn. That keeps the nose loaded. The rear, now light, rotates around the front axle. Instead of waiting for grip to settle, he creates rotation artificially through weight manipulation. Now here's the crucial detail. This only works if you trust the front end absolutely. If the front tyres respond exactly as expected. If aero load remains predictable. If the rear, though light, doesn't snap unpredictably. And this is where Red Bull's philosophy aligned perfectly with him. Under the ground effect era beginning in 2022, Red Bull produced a car that generated stable floor downforce with strong front-end response. The RB19 in particular was praised for aerodynamic efficiency and predictable platform control. But drivers and analysts repeatedly noted something else. The rear could feel edgy under braking. Sergio Perez struggled with entry instability. Verstappen thrived. Why? Because what feels nervous to one driver feels alive to another. Verstappen doesn't fear micro-oversteer under entry. He expects it. He anticipates it. His steering corrections are microscopic, almost invisible. High-speed cameras show tiny countersteer inputs that happen before most drivers would even register rear slip. This is not just bravery, it's anticipation. And anticipation is built on pattern recognition. When aero balance and braking forces behave consistently, the brain learns timing. Max's timing window is razor thin. He turns before others dare. That early rotation shortens distance to apex. Shorter distance equals earlier throttle commitment. Earlier throttle equals higher exit speed onto the straight. Multiply that by 20 corners. Multiply that by 23 races. That's dominance. But now let's introduce 2026. The 2026 regulations represent one of the largest technical resets since the hybrid era began in 2014. The MGU-H is gone. Electrical power output increases significantly, roughly splitting combustion and electric contribution close to 50-50. Cars are targeted to be lighter. Active aerodynamics are introduced on both front and rear wings to balance drag reduction and downforce generation dynamically. Let's focus on active aero first. Under current rules, aerodynamic balance through a corner is relatively stable once braking begins. The wings don't change state dynamically beyond doctus on straights. In 2026, the front and rear wings will adjust modes between straight line efficiency and cornering downforce. That means load distribution can change depending on speed thresholds and system mapping. Here's the dangerous part for an entry specialist. If aero balance transitions even slightly later than expected, if the rear wing regains high downforce mode a fraction of a second after steering commit, the rear axle experiences a temporary load deficit. For a driver braking conservatively, this is manageable. For someone intentionally inducing rotation under rear lightness, this is explosive. So ask yourself, what happens if the timing he has mastered for years shifts by 0.05 seconds? That's not dramatic on paper. On track, that's the difference between controlled rotation and snap oversteer. Now layer in braking system behavior. Without the MGU-H, turbo characteristics change. Energy harvesting through the MGU-K increases in significance. Brake-by-wire calibration must integrate different harvesting profiles. The feel under deceleration will change. Drivers rely on pedal feel to judge load transfer. If rear harvesting torque changes mid-braking zone, rear stability shifts. Remember, Verstappen's weapon is braking while rotating. If harvesting torque creates subtle rear drag variations, that influences your rate at entry. But here's where things become even more interesting. Lighter cars mean lower inertia. Lower inertia means quicker direction changes. That should theoretically help an aggressive entry driver. The car responds faster to steering input. However, lower inertia also means smaller stability margins. Corrections must be quicker. Reaction windows shrink. Verstappen's strength has always been reaction speed combined with anticipation. So is this a disadvantage or a new playground? Before answering that, we need to explore the psychological layer. Dominance changes how rivals think. When one driver consistently outperforms others in corner entry, competitors either attempt to copy or concede. Many tried to copy Verstappen's aggressive rotation style over the past seasons. Few matched it consistently. Some overstepped and spun, some reverted to safer approaches. But 2026 creates something different. Hope. If rivals believe the regulations compress his edge, they attack harder in braking zones. They defend differently. They attempt late lunges, assuming he won't rotate as comfortably under new aero states. Perception shifts racing behavior. And that's where political engineering intersects with driving style. Red Bull's technical department has historically built around Verstappen's feedback. Development paths leaned into strong front bite and a rear that could be managed by someone with his sensitivity. If 2026 requires a more neutral baseline for predictable active aero transitions, does Red Bull soften its philosophy? That's the risk. Build too safe and you blunt his sharpness. Build too aggressive and active aero unpredictability punishes you. Let's zoom into steering trace detail. Data overlays often show Verstappen reaching peak steering angle earlier in the corner phase than rivals. That means directional commitment occurs sooner relative to speed reduction. He's effectively bending the racing line tighter earlier. This allows him to straighten the wheel earlier on exit. Now imagine active aero mapping that slightly delays peak front down force under braking. His instinct says, commit. The front isn't fully loaded yet. Micro understeer appears. That alters his entire rhythm. Elite drivers operate on rhythm, disrupt rhythm, and lap time fluctuates. But here's where critics underestimate him. Verstappen has evolved across regulation changes before. Early career Max was pure aggression. Later, Max became calculated aggression. Under high downforce cars, he thrived. Under porpoising ground effect cars, he adapted quickly while others struggled with oscillation instability. Engineers frequently praise his feedback precision. He can describe front grip loss in subtle increments. That sensitivity accelerates car development. If active aero mapping needs refinement, his input may shorten the adaptation curve. Now let's talk about exit, because entry and exit are inseparable. His early rotation gives him earlier throttle windows. But throttle application in modern F1 is complicated. It's not binary, it's progressive. He modulates pedal input to manage rear slip angle before committing full torque. With 2026 increasing electric torque contribution, throttle maps become even more critical. Electric torque is instantaneous. Managing it while the car is still slightly yawed requires precision. Verstappen's right foot has historically been exceptionally smooth. High-speed pedal cam footage shows gradual application even when the car looks sideways. So consider this scenario. Active aero transitions are perfected. Brake harvesting is calibrated. Electric torque is mapped aggressively but predictably. Lighter chassis responds faster. In that environment, his aggressive entry plus precise exit could become even more lethal. But here's the alternative scenario. Active aero mapping lags slightly. Harvesting torque varies unpredictably. Front downforce ramp-up timing differs between low and high-speed corners. Now his natural instinct to commit early becomes riskier. He must hesitate slightly. That hesitation shrinks his advantage. And in Formula One, shrinking advantage is enough for rivals to strike. Let's add historical context. In 2014, the hybrid power unit reset dramatically changed the competitive order. Drivers who excelled under previous V8 throttle response needed to recalibrate for turbo torque curves and energy deployment strategies. Some adapted quickly, some struggled. 2026 is similar in scale. Power delivery changes. Aero philosophy changes. Energy management becomes even more central to lap time. Corner entry is no longer isolated from energy strategy. Brake later, harvest differently. Harvest differently, deploy differently on exit. Deploy differently, influence straight line speed. Everything connects. Verstappen's dominance has been built partly on simplifying complexity. He reduces chaotic variables into predictable patterns through repetition. If 2026 increases variables, dynamic aero, dynamic harvesting windows, lighter inertia, his task becomes managing complexity at higher speed. But here's something subtle. Drivers who excel at managing instability often excel because they understand weight transfer instinctively. Weight transfer physics don't disappear in 2026, they evolve. If his feel for load peaks remains superior, he recalibrates timing and continues dominating entry phases. Now let's talk about rivals. Drivers like Charles Leclerc are known for qualifying brilliance and sharp front-end rotation in specific conditions. Lando Norris has improved consistency and tyre management. Lewis Hamilton has historically excelled in adapting to regulation resets across eras. If 2026 rewards smoother aero transitions and stability under harvesting, these drivers could find conditions more aligned with their natural rhythm. And that's where championship battles ignite. Imagine a scenario where Verstappen's entry advantage compresses by just 1/10 per lap. Over a race distance, that's significant. Suddenly, overtaking becomes harder. Defensive positioning becomes more contested. Race strategies diversify. But let's introduce another possibility. What if active aero actually enhances front-end response under braking? If front wing angle increases precisely at entry speed thresholds, front bite could become sharper than ever, but only if synchronized perfectly with rear load restoration. In that world, an aggressive entry specialist gains even more rotation potential. See how fragile the balance is? 2026 doesn't guarantee exposure, it guarantees volatility. And volatility is dangerous for everyone. So now we arrive at the core question. Is Verstappen's corner entry dominance a product of Red Bull's philosophy? Or is Red Bull's philosophy a product of Verstappen's corner entry? If it's the first, 2026 levels the field. If it's the second, he reshapes the philosophy again. Let's revisit the psychological dimension one more time. Dominant drivers often carry an aura. Rivals hesitate. They defend differently. They expect brilliance. If early 2026 races show slight vulnerability under braking, that aura cracks. Even briefly, rivals attack harder. But if the first few races show him rotating even more violently, adapting seamlessly to active aero transitions, confidence spreads in the opposite direction. Momentum in Formula One is mental as much as mechanical. And Verstappen's mental resilience has been forged through intense championship battles. So here's the final layer. Corner entry is about commitment. Commit too early, and you spin. Commit too late, and you lose time. Verstappen built his reign by committing earlier than anyone else and surviving. 2026 doesn't remove commitment, it changes the consequences of mistimed commitment. And that is why this regulation shift is so fascinating. Because for the first time in years, the phase of the corner where he built his advantage enters an era of engineered unpredictability. Will that unpredictability compress his margin, or will it give him new tools to dominate? Now I want to hear from you. If active aero shifts rear load timing, if energy harvesting alters braking feel, if lighter cars shrink stability margins, does that finally neutralize the corner entry king? Or does 2026 create the most complete version of Max Verstappen we've ever seen? Comment below. Will the new physics expose him or empower him? And if you want deep technical breakdowns that go beyond headlines and actually explain how driving styles collide with regulation changes, subscribe now. Because when 2026 testing begins, we're not just watching lap times, we're analysing steering traces, brake maps, aero state transitions, and we'll see exactly who solved the new era first. The next chapter of Formula One won't begin on the straight, it will begin under braking. Right where Max built his empire.